Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. Today we're continuing our Festival of Fear by taking a look at Hide by Kiersten White. This title came out in May of 2022 and comes in at 240 pages. As always, we shall take a look at the story, the characters, the world building and the presentation of the title as a whole. Also, if you enjoy this video, please consider dropping a like down below and leaving a comment. Let me know what you're reading for spooky season this year. But with all that out of the way, let's begin. So let's start with the story for this one then, and the setup is quite simple. There is a dilapidated theme park that has been abandoned for a number of years, and 14 contestants are invited to take place in a high-stakes game of hide and seek over the course of 7 days. These people are from various different backgrounds. They seemingly have no connection to each other. There is an NDA in place, so they can't sort of discuss what happens in here with anyone. And on top of that, there is also the fact there's no outside coverage here. You can't get cell phone signal. So they're going to be, in effect, cut off from the outside world. And the basic rules they are given is that during the day, you go out and you hide. If you don't get caught at nightfall, a flashlight will go up at the camp telling you you're clear to return, and then you can return to camp for the night. You'll be fully resupplied there and then rinse and repeat the next day. Obviously, this is not entirely true. They don't know who's hunting for them or what's hunting for them, as the case may be. They haven't seen any cameras, even though this is meant to be like a reality show with TV rights, so on and so forth. And that kind of helps add to the creepy feel of this. On top of that, the park itself is poorly maintained. It's been abandoned for decades at this point. So it's very dilapidated, rotting like roller coasters, peeling paint. And like anything that was originally aimed at children, once it starts falling apart and the sort of veneer gets shaved off a little bit, it adds to the creepy factor. This is then made even more creepy by the fact that after the first day, 3 people don't return, and their sort of guide, for want of a better term, their outside connection, comes in and tells them that, oh, by the way, 2 people will be eliminated every day until the last day. Something they weren't told at the beginning. And from there, it escalates as they realise there's more connections between each of them than they originally realised, and there's something else going on. This is a really strong structure and location to set a story like this, and the story itself is actually really strong. It pulls from that creepy fear of the location itself, the tension of hide and seek in general, which can be quite a tense game, a high stakes and high reward with a £50,000 winning pot at the end for the winner. And also other stuff going on. There's some interesting links to Greek mythology going on here as well, which I appreciate. So overall, the story is very, very strong for this one. On to characters. And the main character in this is Mack, or Mackenzie Black. And she has an interesting character arc. She is a young lady who is currently living in a shelter for young people. I think she's too young to be living on her own. That's the impression I get from the story. I can't remember if it actually states her age in here. And basically she's given the opportunity to enter this competition, and she's told that this would be perfect for her because she is an expert at hiding and not being seen. She has a great deal of trauma in her past, which does play into the story, and her own mentality. The fact she is hiding is because she is trying to hide from her own past and not have to face up to it in many regards, and some of the horrible memories that she's got. And she has an interesting character arc when she kind of not so much comes to terms with her past, but kind of starts to accept it by the end of the book. The rest of the characters don't fare quite so well. You do get time with pretty much every character in this. You get a little bit from everyone's point of view, but not a huge amount. A lot of them come across as caricatures. So for example, you've got the sort of the mystic young lady who's got all the heavy bangles and is all into deep spiritualism and all that sort of stuff. You've got someone described as the walking toothpaste commercial. You've got sort of the bro who is very much, I want everyone to look at my shredded body while in a pool. you've got the influencer who has lots of followers who is trying to make an app to take over the industry. The one thing these all have in common is they're all young people who at this point have nothing to lose and everything to gain by entering this competition. Now, that being said, there is a couple of characters that get a little bit more sort of build up. The main one being one of the two Avas that are in this. Becomes a bit of a love interest for Mack in many regards, and she is an army vet who served in Afghanistan, and she's very much lost the use of a leg. She's scarred, clean shaven because her hair's been burned away by an explosion, and she again, much like Mack, is hiding and trying to get away from trauma that she suffered while she was an active service person in, I think it was Afghanistan, I could be wrong on that. You get little things as well for the people who organise this event, and that's really good, and there is enough there to sort of drive you through for the main characters themselves, but the actual rest of the contestants, when they start going missing and you see what happens to them, doesn't have the emotional impact it perhaps could have had if we spent more time with them, at least for me personally. So overall, the main character of Mack is solidly done, if not particularly likeable, but the lack of build-up for a lot of the others, which makes sense for the amount of time we had with them, does kind of hurt the emotional impact of the story at times. Alright, I have things to say about the setting and the world building for this one, and it's really, really good. First off, we'll talk about the park itself. The park is very well realised. The state that it is currently in is well described. You get a sense of creepiness just from the descriptions of how some of the rides look, how the trees have just grown so big and tall so you can't really see anything, how the overgrowth has sort of started taking over, and it's almost made it maze-like, which, as it turns out later on, does have an explanation to it. On top of that, you also have the town that's just next door to the park that kind of opened up around the same time, and how pristine that place is, which is really interesting as a contrast to the park itself, even though nobody really seems to live there. Not really, or at least not many people. You then have the sort of general sense of unease just from the fact that these are young people who, for a lot of their lives, they've lived in, for want of a better term, almost like a social media bubble for many of them. They're not distressed, but they feel uncomfortable away from the apps, the phones, the technology, and the creature comforts. This is a situation they've never been in, so it establishes straight away how different this is from normal life. And on top of that, there's enough odds to bits of their backstory as well, some characters more than others, that again explain their reactions when they're in the park itself. Finally as well, you do have journals that they find in here, 2 books in particular, that kind of explain the supernatural elements that are going on, because there's something else going on in this story that is not clear from the beginning, and it really does a good job of fleshing out good 100 years thereabouts of history about what is going on here and the real reasons why the park was originally built. Overall, the world building in here is really, really, really strong, and I appreciate what it did and how it adds to the tension as a whole of this story. It's really strong. Presentation then. Now, we've got a picture of the cover on screen. The cover I've got is actually a reddy orange rather than a yellow, and I think this is a better cover in general. But it does, the picture of the routes on the cover, like underneath the theme park, is actually quite important for one of the themes in the book, which I'm not going to spoil here. The other thing of note as well, however, is that this does have a map, which we love a good map. I like maps. Maps are good. Which gives you an idea of how the park's laid out, and it does give you almost like a visual guide to where the various characters end up throughout the story. I like the way the dialogue's written in here as well. I think the dialogue is well done. On the flip side, however, this does jump about quite a bit. Whilst the majority of the story is told from the point of view of Mack, it will occasionally jump from first to third person, which can be a little bit jarring, and on top of that as well, it can jump to other characters seemingly at random. Doesn't always make sense why we're seeing things through the eyes of certain characters. Sometimes it works perfectly fine, other times it's quite jarring. That being said, this book does build a good sense of tension, but it does feel, because of those jumps in perspective, kind of loses its flow a little bit. And in certainly the first quarter of the book, it is quite slow going, and it's actually quite a difficult first quarter to read, as it's not really building up tension per se. It's just basic scene setting, which it doesn't necessarily need, or on the flip side, it needs a longer title to pay off better than this does, as again, as mentioned previously, you do kind of have a lack of emotional investment in the majority of the cast. So the presentation for this was really a massively mixed bag for me personally. So I'm a bit torn on this one, to be honest. On the one hand, you've got the premise, which is amazing. The world building is really good as well. The descriptive work is solid. The drawback then comes when you start hitting the characters, because you're bouncing around different perspectives of the same character, and then from different character to different character as well, seemingly at random at times. And also, it doesn't build any real emotional attachment, even really for me personally, to the main character of Mack, because she's not a particularly likeable sort of lead character for a title like this, even though her character does make complete sense. I like the supernatural elements, and there's some interesting imagery used in here that links back to Greek mythology that I really, really like, and I didn't quite pick up on straight away in terms of the supernatural threat that's going on here. I like the almost cultish backstory around the area and the organisation that's come up with this idea. I like the nod to social media, but there's just something in the style of this book that left me feeling a little bit cold. So there is a good horror story in here. There is. I think that this had potential to be a lot better than it eventually was for me personally, unfortunately. So for me, this goes solidly in C tier. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but ultimately I actually found this one a little bit disappointing. But that's my thoughts. I'd love to know yours. As I said before, let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you all next time.